Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Out of the Fog. I'm your host, Laura Beltonba, and we have quite the episode for you today. I'm joined by Dr. Janine Hubbard, who is president-elect of the Canadian Psychological Association, and we also get a chance to chat with Anna Smith, who's director of programs with Genesis. So sit back, relax, we'll get right to it.
At RogersTV, we know our community thrives because of the incredible people who support it. Today, we want to extend a heartfelt thank you to all our amazing volunteers. Your hard work, dedication, and passion make our productions possible, bringing local stories and events to life for everyone to enjoy. Whether you're behind the camera, in the control room, or helping at events, your contributions are invaluable.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm now joined by, honestly, the one and only Dr. Janine Hubbard, who is a registered psychologist and the incoming president-elect for the Canadian Psychological Association. Janine, you're back.
I'm back. It's been far too long.
I
Thanks
know.
for inviting me.
Well, you have done amazing things since the last time we chatted. So, president-elect, let's start there.
Sure.
When do we become reigning ruler of the Psychology Association?
Well, at the moment, I am a sponge and absorbing huge amounts of information. And I take on the presidency at our AGM in Montreal this June. And then the following June, so 2027, I give my keynote address in Victoria, BC, and then I spend one last year as past president.
Okay, so this is the third time someone from Newfoundland and Labrador is sitting as the president of the Canadian Psychological Association, but the first time that Newfoundlander is a woman.
Well, and given that the organization's been around since 1940, I think
It's time.
It's time.
It's
Absolutely.
been time. So how does it feel for you to be walking into that role?
Well, I'm, again, very excited. I think the fact that, yes, historically it's an organization that often had leadership from academia, and until fairly recently, it was an occupation that was predominantly male, and the face of psychology is changing and continues to change and evolve, and I think that's really exciting.
So before we started recording, you and I were chatting about how the field has changed, especially with the advent and introduction of AI. So how is that feeding into what we're seeing now in psychology?
Well, we are rapidly doing our best to, keep up if that's at all possible. I mean, we first saw a lot of the changes when COVID occurred, and suddenly we were needing to develop telepsychology, but we were also needing to develop ethical guidelines and practice guidelines around how we could do it, but still meet all of the, ethical principles and guidelines that we have to follow as psychologists. And now we're looking at things like ChatGPT, we're looking at so many other software programs, we're looking at AI being used as an alternative therapist, but we're also seeing the impact it's having on our academics in terms of how they teach, how they evaluate students, but also for our researchers. So I was lucky enough, I attended a conference back in November that was focused on AI and psychology, and even the ethics of how do you collect participants when you're doing online data collection, and how do you avoid accessing bots and those types of things that never would have occurred to me when I was walking around as an undergrad going, would you fill in my questionnaire for me, please?
Okay.
It's a constantly evolving world, and figuring out how do we keep up and how do we use it responsibly and ethically, and also keeping in mind the potential impact that it may be having worldwide.
So you and I were chatting earlier as well about like some of the three pillars that the industry, faculty, whatever we want to call it, has. And what are those three pillars, and how do they affect how upcoming psychologists are trained and the things they need as they go into the space?
Perfect. So CPA considers itself the national voice of psychology in Canada. It has about 7,000 members, but it has three pillars. It has practice, which is what most people think of, and that's the position that I'm currently holding, is the director responsible for practice. So working clinicians, face-to-face, in the trenches, but we also have our researchers, and we have our academics. We have the teaching pillar. So all three of those are really being impacted, like I say, in terms of how technology is changing, but then also how are we training our psychologists? Because CPA does accredit graduate programs and residencies across the country, and we do know it's incredibly difficult to get into a graduate program. And it's, quite frankly, and I mean, I'll use myself as an example, it's often a privileged position to be able to get into. The training is very long. I was 13 years in university. And like I say, I get how lucky I am to have been able to do that. So one of the things actually Newfoundland has been leading the forefront on is something called a PsyD. So I have a PhD in clinical psychology. It means, you know, it's what you think of as a doctorate in philosophy, but it's in clinical psychology. We now have a graduate program that is a doctorate in clinical psychology. So it's known as a PSYD. MUN here in the province was the first English language PsyD program in the country. And so it's more of an applied professional degree. So typically 4 to 5 years of grad school as opposed to, you know, 8+. And so we still train in research, we still train in critical analysis of the literature, but it's known as a scholar practitioner model as opposed to a scientist practitioner model. So for example, in mine, I spent 2 years collecting data as part of my dissertation. And, you know, I look back and yes, that was valuable, but the idea of being able to do a really focused training that is then going to put you in as a working professional. Fewer years, very applied training. It's a newer model for the rest of the country, but we're looking at it as a way to address the shortage of psychologists. And again, because it's shorter, and maybe looking at some ways that might be a way to increase diversity within the field, which is sorely needed.
Speaking on that note of diversity, we're seeing that our province, our country, increasingly more diverse. Those who are seeking psychological help will be more diverse. How is the sector and industry trying to meet that need in terms of what education is available and what the psychologists in those spaces kind of look like?
Oh, absolutely. I'd like to also include our northern communities because that's another group in terms of diversity, but difficulty with access of training. So I'm really excited. We don't have a date set yet, but there is going to be an upcoming summit on the future of psychology, and it will involve the academic training institutes, it'll involve CPA, it will involve the regulators, it will involve some of the organizations down in the States that help with some of our regulation and our licensing exams, and really sitting down and saying, okay, how do we make this work? What are our alternatives? At the moment, you know, there's very much a requirement for in-person. Well, could we look at flying an instructor up to a remote community versus expecting students to come down to, you know, a more southern location? What are we looking at? I look at, say, for example, some of the medical school training models and say, how are they increasing diversity in their trainee populations? So it's early stages, but boy, is it exciting.
Okay. So we know you'll be taking on the official role as president in this coming year. What are the things you're really excited to experience, to be part of the decision making that goes into it?
Well, like I say, certainly fundamentally being part of this summit. I'm excited in terms of some of the new people I'll get a chance to meet. In fact, I've got a meeting next week with the president of the American Psychological Association and a number of other key leaders that I otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to, you know, meet with and connect. And truthfully, that's probably one of the main reasons why I even considered taking this on. My mother, who was still organizing conferences and sitting on committees at least a decade after she was retired, so I come by this honestly.
As you do.
She asked, when I was considering it, do you want to do it for the work or for the people? Because she stayed around long after the work was necessarily, you know, as satisfying, but for the people. And when I realized it was both, I thought, okay, this is an opportunity that has presented itself. I didn't go looking for it. I never go looking for these things.
But you
They
always
seem to
they find you because of who you are.
well, they find me, but I'm also willing to say yes. I'm willing to take the gamble. But one of the things that I've learned, and I try to impart to all of my trainees, is the world of Canadian psychology is very small. It feels huge, but I would say at most 1 degree of separation. If you start getting involved in any of the committees of any sort, you meet these amazing people from across the country. And, I used to describe one of the committees I sat on, it was like the provincial counterpart of me. Getting together in a, in a conference room for a weekend. And then we'd go out and we'd, get to have a nice dinner and maybe drink some wine, occasionally go dancing, but really get to know just these amazing people that without stepping forward and volunteering for these things, I wouldn't have encountered.
Okay, so we got about 1 minute before I let you go to your very busy schedule of things and people you have to meet and do. If there was one thing you wanted folks who are in the beginning of their psychology, in the middle of becoming psychiatrists, what would you want them to know so they can maybe they can one day sit in the seat you're sitting in?
What I would say is don't be shy about reaching out. I'm meeting with the daughter of someone I went to high school with who saw the announcement and said, my daughter's in undergrad psychology. Would you be willing to talk to her? Yes, of course. If there are people that you think are doing interesting things, reach out, find out more about it. Don't be shy about asking those questions. We are very much human beings, trust me.
She is very much a human.
We're very real, we're very approachable. And so don't be shy about reaching out, getting involved, and whether it's psychology or any other field, it's a tap on the shoulder leadership. So when you see potential in trainees or students, reach out, but also don't be afraid to take that gamble and say, oh, I'll give it a try.
Well, Janine, you and I know that we could sit here for hours upon hours and have such deep chats. I want to thank you for taking the time. Congratulations yet again. I know it's an honor knowing that living here in Newfoundland, Labrador to have that kind of representation at such a high seat. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we'll be right back.